Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sinister Streamer's Cult Horror Dungeon, your home for the creepiest, spookiest, and weirdest horror movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. I'm your host, the Sinister Streamer, and today we're looking at 3 horror movies from actor, writer, and director Paul Naschy, the biggest horror icon whom you've probably never heard of. Hope you like werewolves, devils, vampires, and soap opera silliness. Naschy's movies have them all. Paul Naschy ranks as one of the most famous Spanish horror directors, writers, and actors in his country. And while his movies are often campy, schlocky, and a bit nonsensical, there's also a passion behind each of his films. Whether Naschy is participating as a writer, actor, or director, that helps his work rise above its flaws. How many movies Naschy starred in is up for debate, with the Internet Movie Database crediting him with 118 acting credits. The same database says that Naschy directed 23 movies and wrote more than 50 screenplays. Yes, Naschy was a busy man. But all these Naschy movies tend to have a few things in common. They're usually populated with a variety of classic monsters, especially werewolves and vampires. They almost always include plenty of female nudity, and Naschy almost always sleeps with his female co-stars. The other thing Naschy's movies always include? Earnestness. You can tell when watching Naschy's films that he loves the horror genre and that he's an especially big fan of the classic Universal monsters. I find that love contagious. It's more than enough for me to overlook whatever plotting oddities or budgetary issues his movies have. Never watched a Naschy movie? Here are 3 that I recommend you check out, and if you like them, good news, there's plenty more where they came from. Let's start with Hunchback of the Morgue from 1973, a great example of what you'll often get with a Naschy film. The story often makes no sense. Characters frequently act illogically. The editing is choppy, with scenes ending too quickly or dragging on too long. Despite that, Hunchback of the Morgue is a fun, sometimes charming watch, with Naschy turning in a strong performance as Gotho, the movie's titular hunchback. The gore is strong here too, as are the creepy interiors, including an underground cavern, an endless supply of flickering torches, an equally endless supply of rats, more on them later, an Iron Maiden, and plenty of skeletons. If you like classic horror movies, you shouldn't be bored with this one. The movie is a bit of an odd mashup. As the name suggests, there's a bit of the Hunchback of Notre Dame here, with Gotho falling in love with the dying Ilsa, the only person who has shown him any kindness. After Ilsa dies, the movie switches to a Frankenstein story, as Gotho teams up with the mad scientist Dr. Orla to bring Ilsa back to life. As you can guess, complications ensue. That description doesn't do justice to the bonkers nature of this movie. Gotho cuts the heads off corpses, suffocates his victims with bouquets of flowers, and burns bodies with acid. And he's not even the villain. The real monster, of course, is Dr. Orla, who's creating a monstrosity that remains hidden behind a locked door for most of the movie. Because this is a Paul Naschy movie, Gotho also has a love scene with Rosanna Yanni's Elka, the only other person in the movie kind to him. If you've seen many Naschy movies, you know that he almost always gets a romantic side plot and a love scene. The Hunchback of the Morgue is no different, even if Naschy is playing a character who is supposed to be repulsive. It's a jarring scene that happens far too suddenly, but it wouldn't be a Naschy movie without Naschy getting some action. It sounds like I'm poking fun at this movie, but I really did enjoy it. Naschy, despite the cheesiness of his movies, is always a commanding screen presence. Gotho does some horrible things in the movie, including murdering so many people it's hard to keep count. But you still feel sorry for him throughout the film. And you recognize that he's far from the monster everyone makes him out to be. That's a credit to Naschy's performance. I also like the visuals here, all those cobwebby tunnels, rats, skulls, and ominous lab equipment. And I was surprised at how gory some of the scenes were. The body mutilations aren't particularly realistic, but they are still disturbing. But one big negative here? There's a creepy scene involving rats that are set on fire. I was hoping that the filmmakers didn't really burn rats alive. Unfortunately, they did. This kind of cruelty wasn't rare during a time in which filmmakers often didn't care about the welfare of the animals in their movies. That unfortunate bit of history, though, ruins what is otherwise an effectively unnerving scene. If you can overlook yet another bit of animal cruelty, you should also check out 1974's Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll, one of the Naschy movies that doesn't feature any supernatural monsters. Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll is a strange movie. It often doesn't make sense. The score is an ill fit for the action on the screen, and it takes a long time for this Spanish film to figure out that it's actually a variation of an Italian giallo movie. But despite all these flaws, and despite my understanding that this is in no way what you'd call a traditionally good movie, I enjoyed this movie immensely. The movie focuses on Naschy's Gilles, a drifter who ends up in a small town full of locals who don't take kindly to strangers. Here he takes a job as a handyman for 3 sisters who live in an isolated rural home. Each of the sisters has some sort of problem. One is wheelchair-bound, one has a prosthetic arm, and one is a nymphomaniac, which admittedly isn't that big of a problem for Naschy's character. Naschy's character has his own issues. He's haunted by dreams that make it seem as if he has strangled a series of women in his past. Are these just dreams, or are they buried memories? To make matters worse, a killer is stalking the community, murdering women with blonde hair and blue eyes. Who is behind these killings? That's the mystery behind Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll. Will you be able to decipher this mystery? Probably not. As with many giallo films, the central mystery is convoluted to the point of nonsense. But if you don't expect perfection in your horror movies, you will have a good time getting to the big unveiling. First, there's Naschy's character. He finds every excuse to take off his shirt, spending a lot of time cutting wood around the sisters' home. He also gets 2 big and rather off-putting sex scenes, sleeping his way through 2/3 of the strange sisters for whom he works. The sex scenes are filmed in an avant-garde manner with strange camera angles and sudden cuts. They're far more strange than they are sexy. Then there's the soundtrack. The film has an upbeat, jazzy little song that plays throughout the movie, often at the most inappropriate times, such as when a character is bleeding to death after being shot, or another character is getting a bloody wound treated. The song plays a lot, more than a dozen times. I guarantee this earworm will get stuck in your head for days. The movie doesn't quite fit together either. Its first half feels more like a sexy soap opera, while its second becomes a fairly straightforward giallo. The 2 halves don't mesh particularly well. Once the giallo portion starts up, the murders happen at a rapid-fire pace, as if the filmmakers realized that they had to act quickly to get all the bloodshed in. Despite its technical flaws, Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll is never boring. There's always something strange happening, even during the slower-paced first half of the movie. It might be the barrel-chested Naschy spending half the movie with his shirt off, or every woman in sight swooning at Naschy's presence. Or maybe it's the woman with the world's clunkiest prosthetic hand, or the nymphomaniac who can't keep her shirt buttoned. The movie has a lot going on. Be aware, though, that there is a cruel and unnecessary killing of a live pig about 50 minutes or so into the movie. Feel free to fast forward through this scene. While Naschy played a lot of characters throughout his long career, he's most famous for portraying Waldemar Daninsky, a reluctant werewolf. Naschy took on the role of Daninsky in 12 movies, including 1973's Curse of the Devil. Curse of the Devil isn't the best Daninsky movie, but it's still a ton of fun. That's largely because Naschy's obvious love of horror and werewolf tales shines through what is a pedestrian plot. As in all the Daninsky movies, Naschy's character is fated to become a werewolf. This time, it's thanks to a medieval curse placed on the Daninsky family by the Satan-worshipping Bathory clan. What I enjoyed about Curse of the Devil is how much director Carlos Ared throws at the screen. There's a lot going on here. The movie starts with a duel between 2 medieval knights on horseback. There's a bloody execution of Satan-worshipping witches, an orgy involving the devil himself, A lunatic serial killer recently escaped from an asylum, and, of course, plenty of werewolf action. If you're ever bored with Curse of the Devil, just wait, the plot will throw a different curveball at you before too long. As is typical of Naschy's films, there is plenty of sex and nudity too, with most every young woman in the cast falling at one time into Naschy's bed. In other words, this is a fairly typical Naschy movie. Not a great one, but not a terrible one either. It also looks beautiful. Curse of the Devil has a gothic look to it, with dark forests, moonlit skies, fog-shrouded landscapes, and stately castles providing plenty of eye candy. And the werewolf effects? They're pretty good for what is obviously a limited budget. Naschy looks a bit like Lon Chaney Jr.'s iconic Wolfman when he's in werewolf mode, standing upright and wearing human clothes. But there are plenty of shots of the werewolf's face suddenly floating onto the screen from the darkness, its eyes and teeth almost glowing. It's a nice and rather creepy effect. The central love story is solid too. You believe that Daninsky and his new love Kringa are fond of each other. It's inspiring too to see Kringa take the lead in curing Daninsky near the film's conclusion. Are any of these three Naschy movies masterpieces? No. They probably won't make anyone's list of the best horror movies of all time, but they are undeniably entertaining and charming. If you are a fan of international horror and you're ready to explore the work of an iconic actor and director, give these movies a try. You might just find yourself becoming a Naschy fan.